Greetings, technology enthusiasts. I am Chandrahas and I am delighted to be here with you representing CyberBrainer. Do you not believe that the technology sector is advancing at an unprecedented rate, making this an opportune moment to acquire the skills that will facilitate your progress? With CyberBrainer, we are empowering you to take control of your own future. At CyberBrainer, we do not merely impart your interests. We assert that information is power, yet it is the application of knowledge that distinguishes you. Our courses are meant to equip you with essential skills, whether you are pursuing data science, understanding artificial intelligence, or delving into cybersecurity. Let us commence the session and seize the future today. Thank you.
Today we will cover something on Workday, the reporting related to learning. We will see what kind of data sources are there related to learning and how do we extract data from that. I will just quickly walk through on the steps that we have done for creating campaign. If there is an audience that you have already created, you can just pick from the list of audiences that you have created for that specific audience. If there is no audience where your custom report is not part of that audience, you need to create that one. Thank you. The final note you take, everyone is like, you want to sell it. Thank you. 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 Why did the employee success care specific query import for Mathematica Meet Enter? You wanted to attack your customer portals. Your employee business subject will not work. Worker is the only primary business object which will work for any kind of business case. When considering your report should be detected those you can peg no alerts or custom reports. You know anything. You know that you wanted to consider make sure the head your report is sitting in a worker business subject. That is the first consideration that you will be making. Again, the second is standard. Data source type is standard. Basically, there are types of data sources. One is standard, the other one is indexed. Indexed data source are obviously used to filter large volumes of data. You know where you can see standard data source. Here you don't have any other filtering option because it does not have that option. But when you select your index type data source, you will be having a lot of other filtering options within the business object built-in filters. I can say so index data source will have a additional feature built in to filter large volumes of data within the data source. Let's say for example Parker is only of their no business object. So let's say if worker is a kind of index data source pinned, when you select index data source pinned within the area a lot of filtering options that you'll be getting. You wanted to return retirees, you wanted to return terminations, you wanted to return active or return terminations. So this kind of built. In filters, you will be getting index data sources between REST and standard data source. You'll be not getting your need to set this option to filter your data. But with index data source, within the data source, you will be having a lot of filtering options to filter huge amount of data. So that is a difference between standard data source and index data source. So whenever you are actually creating a report that needs to be attached for campaigns or alerts, make sure that your data source is be standard and your primary business subject is worker. So these are the two considerations that you need to make whenever you are recreating a report that needs to be attached to either campaign or alert. Business object is setable table which consists of all the information. Data source is a view of your business object, okay, example for business. Object is worker, okay, example for data source is terminated workers, worker business, it could be. It could be. It could be people are on leave anything worker or object will be holding a kind of umbrella I can say which will be holding all the information of a particular data. But whereas the data source is a view of our business object your choice. If you wanted to select your data source as active employees, you can choose. If you can choose, see if I wanted to select your data source as IDs you can choose. But all these reterminations activate IDs or will be from business object called worker. So worker is a business object is a kind of W in Workday. Every data that you create in Workday is a kind of object model which is nothing but a kind of business object which will be stored in business object. Let's say you're creating a hiring an employee. Since you hire an employee, well, this data should go. When you're hiring an employee is nothing but a worker. Once you hire an employee into Workday, that data will be going into worker business object. And from worker business object, if you wanted to return data related to different scenarios. Let's say you have big stories. Let's say you have small different scenarios. Let's say you have been asked to, hey, you have been asked to. Can you create a report form? No, that returns all the retirees. That should not include the active employees, that should not include the terminations, that should not include the people who are on leave. I wanted to have employees who have got retired. Then in that scenario, there are multiple ways to achieve this thing. Let me show example how we can. When you're recreating custom report itself, you have an option to choose which data source set you wanted to have. The example that I said, if I wanted to return only retirees. Business object should be worker. Data source under worker, you have lot of things retirees. Now example of selected retirees. Where this retiree is coming from. This is coming from worker only. Data source is nothing but a view of your business object. How you wanted to view the data from the business object is the data source that is making the difference. If you wanted to view active employees, you pick that active employees data source. If you wanted to pick only terminated employees, you pick terminated. If you wanted to return only retirees, you will pick retiree data source. Data source is nothing but it's a view of your business object. What you wanted to view the data from the business objects. After running the report, that is where you make a choice of selecting the data source. Now, if you wanted to, let's say worker is a primary business object, which I'm saying. Now there are multiple things that you can do with more worker. Let's say you have been asked to return only retiree employees. That should not include any other. What you'll do, you'll choose that particular data source. I've chosen a data source called all retirees. This data source is sitting on worker business object only. You can see here the data source is sitting in worker business object only. When you go into report definition page, you see the business object is worker. Data source is a view of your business object. There is a different child table. Parent child table is different, but data source is different. You're seeing a worker. You also have an option to select a different sources. Now you can see here, if you go to the list of sources, you have a lot of different sources that you can choose from your business object. Data source is nothing but a data that you wanted to view from your business object where you choose the data source. Worker is a kind of data. Business object that I said in worker you have multiple sources. If you wanted to, I said if you wanted to return only all retirees, only if you wanted to return data of retirees, nothing but an employee. Employee got terminated with a termination reason as retiree. Retiree will be sitting in worker business object and all workers irrespective of status, retirees, terminations, leave, active irrespective of the status. If you wanted to return or report worker data with all the status, you'll go for all worker data source. If you wanted to return only for pre-hires, employee whose profile has got created and who are in pre-hire status and going in recruitment process. If you wanted to return them, you will be selecting this particular data source called the rehires. If you wanted to return only terminations, there is a different data source. In worker, there are multiple, data sources which will be returning employees of that particular category. Data source is not a kind of child table. Data source is a view of your business object, is how we know that makes to view the data sitting in your business object. There's a different concept called a parent table and child table in reporting. That is different, but the data source is nothing. But whenever you're creating a report, you're telling the report that I wanted to view the data of this category. You'll be selecting that particular data source. If you wanted to return employees who are on leave, if you wanted to return employees who got terminated, you'll be selecting that respective data source that will return you. To that data who are terminated or who are active or who are terminated, who are leave, who are retirees, all the status in it you'll be selecting at data source level. That is one option. Whatever I'm saying is selecting a data source level is one object. But let's say if you have selected all workers as your data source, which will be returning all terminations, all retirees, all active employees, people who are on leave, everything all workers in the sense, irrespective of the status, it will be returning every employee that is there in the system. Now, if you wanted a filter for terminated, if you wanted a filter for retirees, if you wanted a filter for people who are on leave, if you wanted a filter only for active employees, that is something in a different way. You can do that filtering in report level. The first thing is at data source level. You have a choice to select the data source that you wanted to have. Whatever data that you are looking for, you have a choice of filtering the data at data source level. But if you wanted to go with kind of super data source where it will be having all the status, you can also have. You also have an option at the report level. You can go for filtering. You have selected all workers now. Now you have also have an option to select a status. If you wanted to return active employees, you go for active status. You will be selecting this one. If you wanted to return only terminated, you will be selecting this one. If you wanted to return on leave, people who went on leave, if you want to return to the report level, you will be selecting. At the report level also, you have an option to filter your data. Probably not the number of reports that you create. That will be. You'll be carrying that experience. You know to understand how to filter large volumes of data in terms of reporting. But conceptually just understand that your data source, indexed data source, will be having filters. Filters, built-in filters, but standard data source whatever, and I'm filtering the data, you have to filter that. But index data source, you have an option. Let's say if I pick any of the indexed data source, I'll show you that example as well. How you select indexed data source. Now you can note the difference. Now when I'm selected a data source, which is under primary business subject called worker, where the data source type is standard, I do not have any kind of filtering options at data source level. Now, if I go for a data source at a data source of indexed category, I'll be able to do filtering at data source level. Now, in order to select that one, whenever you wanted to select indexed data source, the only thing that you need to do is you need to check this checkbox. If you're unchecking this checkbox, it means that you wanted to have standard data source. If you're checking this checkbox, you wanted to have a data source of indexed. That is the difference that you need to know. Now I'm picking up indexed data source, which will be having filtering options at data source level. The standard data source will not have built-in filtering options. But you see here indexed data source. You have filtering options at source level. You have an option to filter at data source level, which is a kind of feature that you have with indexed data source. This feature will not be having in standard data source. Because if this is of index data source, you have an option to filter your data within data source because it consists of built-in prompts. So what we have done for standard data source, we have gone here and ahead written by having a kind of filter conditions, but for index set data source, you also have an option to actually filter the data at source level. So if you wanted a filter terminated, if you wanted a filter only employees, active employees, or in a different category by row worker for organization, you have multiple filtering criteria within index data source which you do not find in standard data source. So index data source have feature of filtering large volumes of data within the source level, but standard data source does not have a need filter data reportable. There is a difference between two and what I recommend to see index text data source further complex reporting the huge data requirements. What I recommends to index data source TPP because it has filtering options within the report. Rather than your IT hard-coded filtering report, when you are actually building huge node data turning the report tip as recommended data sources index data source tip with which will avoid any kind of performance issues when you are running the custom report that is returning huge amount of data. So index data source has a feature of filtering huge volumes of data at source level, the standard data source. You have an option to filter at a portal when you are actually creating report. You have an option of all active employees. You can go for data at date source also, but that will not be sitting in worker business object. That will be sitting in employee business object. You have an option to go with. You know that. Also, it's completely depends upon your hands-on experience how we are creating report. Let's say you will be in master. Hey, can you get him? You know how React is during this particular period of time, let's say from 2018 to 2020. Get method report that has all the information of active employees. Now it depends upon your thinking. It depends upon your experience what data source that you will be using. As you said at starting level only you have an option to select all active employees and you can filter the data within that range. But if you are going with all workers data source or all activity terminated data source or the other report that you was showing in index is right. You can go with this also. So with this report TP also you can go, but the only thing is you need to filtering it. Reportable that active state is active. Status is send via date. Between the state range you will be selecting. So it depends upon your hands-on, depends upon your thinking how you want it to create your report. All workers, all workers, all workers, all workers, all workers, all workers, all active employees. You have an option to select it source level and also you have an option to filter that reportable. The Workday has given a number of business of hundreds of business object, hundreds of data source. It depends upon your knowledge and your thinking. You know how you wanted to build your report. If I wanted to have your report without any kind of filtering conditions, that source lively will picking that particular source called little active employees. You know data source that you will be selecting and you will be creating a report on that. Let's say worker is the one. The other primary is on I can say, but probably not depends on when you get complete hands on and reporting. You will be able to understand this and you're retelling that. You are saying that you know primary parent and child that will be coming here. Let's say if I am using a worker as a primary business object and if I wanted to return all the benefits that worker is getting, so benefits is nothing but different concept, different object. So benefits will be sitting in benefits business object. So how the employee will be getting benefits, they need to roll into a particular benefit plan and you know they need to particular benefit plan and eligibility date. All these things you know will be considered in no depends upon you know the plan that is being issued for you. If I going to know the plan. If I ask to see if I ask it to return. If I ask to return. That is remark after you wanted to. Your program company suddenly now I can get mail the worker role the employees you know how you enrolled in particular benefit plan. For example, for Workday Kendo, so if I got till active employees, that doesn't make sense. You what your requirement is. You wanted to return care employees who are already enrolled into that particular benefit plan. So there are certain cases. Probably you will be understanding. You know when you create a multiple reports, there is a concept called parent-child relationship between reports parentable and childable. In Workday, we call it as primary business object and related business object. Our related business object is a child of parent to business object. So when you are actually creating report with primary business object called worker, and when you are actually adding the secondary business subject called related business object, which is returning benefits of the leave, which means per employee, which means that you're joining the W or joining the business object, you're actually clubbing the data to return the tone. So worker is a primary business object which is a parent. For almost all the business object that is sitting in work debital active employees, which I said right that will be sitting employee business object which will not work as a kind of parent and child relationship between the business object that sits in Workday. Worker is the only business object we sucked that will be associated, that will be linked to a new thermodally FL that is sitting in Workday. Let's say if I wanted to return learning enrollments. Learning enrollments. You wanted a return. Now, worker is the only primary business object that will link with the learning enrollments. But employee, there is other object. I said employee. Employee will not be linking with the learning enrollments. Worker is the primary business object, a kind of super object. I can say it's top powerful business object that will be linking with any other business object in Workday, which can be considered as a parent table. Worker is a kind of parent object and related business object. For what you link learning enrollments, you are linking learning enrollments will be becoming a related business object is a kind of child table and benefit elections. Benefit elections. You wanted to return all the benefit elections that employee has made. Benefit elections is a related business object of worker. We will be able to, make your choice depends upon your business requirement, how you wanted to return the data. But remember, in any scenario in Workday reporting, worker is the mostly used a business object in any module. Any module. If you are being asked to, let's say if you wanted to, if you've been asked now, can you get me the list of open job requisitions or job requisitions, a list of job requisitions for which employee has got tied up. If you have been asked what you will do. No need of looking for any kind of, different scenarios there is. If your report requirement is to return worker information, worker is a primary business object. We can give worker as a primary business object. Childly table as a job requisition or child table as a learning enrollment or child table as a benefit elections, anything. Your primary business object is worker and your related can be anything that you wanted to have that it to link to your primary business object whenever it's conceptually understand. Whenever you have been asked to create a report, the first consideration that your report should be sitting in worker, a business object which will be linking to all other business object that sits in Workday. But there are, any number of business subject and number of data source. But once you get some hands on experience, you will be able to choose yourself. You'll be able to decide yourself. What would be the business object of my report? What would be the source? What would be the child table of my report? You will be able to identify. You will be able to understand yourself the number. The more you create report, the more understanding you'll be getting. I know this. Whatever concept that I was trying to explain, you'll be able to relate that one. Let's say tomorrow. You have been asked they can get me employees, a list of employees and all their dependent information. What do you do? What do you do? You will be creating your report in worker business object and you will be choosing dependent as a child table child object and will be returning the dependent information under worker. Your worker will be depending. The worker will be relating to your dependent secondary business or worker is a primary business object and dependent is a child. If you're going for data source that is not coming under worker, that only said that you said If you wanted to at source level, If we wanted to select all active employees, rather than at report level filtering, why can't we do at source level? You can do, but your source. Your depends upon your source. Your object will change you the. The basic thing that you need to know here is which sources will be coming and which business object. That is one thing that you need to understand. For that, there are multiple standard reports, in Workday. All data sources is one thing that you have. This is the standard report which will return you all the data sources sitting in or under that particular business object. That will give you enough information of choosing which data source and which business object, let's say else filter, with the primary business subject as worker. You see, when I filtered with the worker business object, you see a lot of data sources associated with worker. With which you can play your own in your reporting in with the frequency, contingent worker, and benefit thing, retirees. Whatever I was saying to explain your primary business of it will be holding all this. But let's say if you wanted to other than worker, which will be pulling worker information. Let's say employee is also worker, but both are subset to each other. You have the same sources. If you wanted to return active employees, you will be choosing that source level, and it will be when you choose all active employees. Your business of it will be changing here. It will be moving from worker to employee, but data will be same. The only thing is you will be not having option to link to other business object. Let's say if you wanted to return benefit elections. Benefit elections cannot be linked to employee business object or job requisition. If you've been asked to return no job requisitions of worker, you'll be not able to link your job requisition business object to your employee business object learning enrollment. If you've been asked to return all the learning enrollments of an employee, you'll be not able to link learning and elements to employee because worker is a kind of business object that will only link to any other business object in one day, but employee will not be able to link to any other. There is a reason why you choose the data source that is sitting under worker business object, mostly 90% of reporting cases. You'll be actually choosing worker as a kind of primary business object. You know that data source will be choosing but depends upon. It's not like you are invited to go in this way only, so it depends upon your thinking. You know how you wanted to build your report. Only the ideal objective of choosing this data source and business object is returning data how you want it to have. That is only things that you need to make so you can go with. Employee data source which is sitting in worker BC which is sitting in employee business object, but still if I wanted to choose your worker as a kind of primary business object. So it depends upon your hands on and depends upon your understanding how you wanted to create reports. But the ideal the concept is worker as a kind of super business object which can be linked to any other business object in Workday. And if I were actually choosing the primary business object as worker, so you very open link your worker to another business object in Workday, whether it is learning, recruiting, performance, benefits, payroll, anything, any model. Your worker business object will be able to link to that particular business object in the other modules and return theta in that respective category. So you can pick any of these business object that you wanted to return. All workers you can create. You can select all workers, and if I wanted to filter with active, I can do that. Anya mostly is data source in Workdays for worker related information, Active and terminated workers is a data source which is mostly used in Workday. Play around with worker information, you can choose this data source and If you wanted a filter for terminated, you can do that. If you wanted a filter for active, you can do that, you can do it. If you wanted to go with all workers, if I wanted to complete employee information access aspect of the status, you can go with all workers. Solely we will be having contingent workers, will be having retirees, everything you will be having in this data source, and this will be linked it to any other business object. If you are looking for the benefits, if you are looking for payroll, if you are looking for learning, anything can be associated with the worker business option. Any information that you wanted to link with worker learning and enrollment. Learning enrollment is nothing but employee will be enrolling into learning. There is a way that you can link worker and learning and all, but course is not related to employee. If you wanted to return all the active courses, all the courses that are available in Workday, there is a different source for that. One course is there, course name is there are different sources. Let's say there are different data sources. For course, you will be selecting this particular data source to create report on course, list of courses. For this would be the ideal one, that you wanted to go with courses which will return all the list of courses that are available in Workday. There's another one, courses, which is sitting in learning courses business object. This also will work, but this is indexed data source. This would give a kind of conceptual understanding for you in creating reports, but the more reports that you create will give practical understanding. Whatever Ways explaining you. It's kind of a basic concept of reporting concept. But so when you implement this, when you create this on when you get hands on, that will be helpful for you in managing any reporting requirements that is on your way. So now we'll see different scenarios related to learning to create report. So here are the data sources that are available in Workday for learning. If you wanted to report learning instructors, you will be choosing the tone. If you wanted to return enroll limits, you will be choosing the zone. But if I wanted to now go with worker handles or doing of reporting and endowments. För different alter you can also think is have a worker as a kind of your primary business objects up. Sorry, so you can have your primary business up to worker, and then you can add learning enrollment as a kind of related business object to your worker business object. Or you can also do the way Chevy report and learning. So have you report on any of your non related learning business object? Is a learning and elements is the okay no? So if you wanted to have some kind of interlink column and rows, you'll be choosing transports. And box is a kind of row dimension which is mostly used in finance module, so it depends upon your requirements. The most used reporting is advanced, which can be turned to retain a tableau format and can be associated with any integrations in Workday. Other reports cannot be linked with integrations. That is the reason why a mostly used report in Workday is advanced, which will be having advanced filtering options, advancing reporting methods. You know that you can play around with the integrations also. Also, advanced report can be attached to integrations to pick the data and send to external system. Mostly used report is advanced. Now I've used learning enrollments as a kind of data source here. The primary business object that will be coming here is learning enrollment. Now if I also wanted to have worker information here, what I can do is I can just add worker as a kind of related business object, because worker can be linked to any other business object in Workday said. You have an option to link worker to your learning business. Now, what is your primary business object here? Your learning enrollment is a kind of primary business object and worker is a kind of related business or is a kind of child table. Now you have linked in that way. You will be able to get worker in any of the business object, but you will be not able to any employee will be not able to get other business objects that are associated with worker only. Worker is a kind of business object that will be pulled into any other business object. Just take a look in this area and tomorrow we'll be going into some examples of returning the data from Workday. We'll be creating a few reports with some real-time scenarios. Even the data is not there, but we'll be going with worker. I think from worker we'll be having a lot of data in the system. We'll go in that scenario, and try to understand how reporting will work. We'll be taking 3 to 4 examples of courses, enrollments, completion status, tracking enrollments, and also we'll be creating some instructors and see how we can report on them. All these things. We'll take 3 to 4 examples of learning, do the area and probably create custom report. In that scenario, when you're selecting the required learning category, what you will do is, the course that you are selecting, the courses that you are selecting when you're creating campaign. You also have an option to select a learning course. That will be marked as a kind of, required kind of content for an employee when you're creating campaign. Yesterday we have selected a notification, but you have all. You also have an option to select learning course when they're sending campaign to employees. Based on that learning course thing, you'll be able to send a campaign. We have seen different options there. You also have an option to select learning course when you're sending a campaign. When you select this required the learning content, this learning course will be a kind of a choice. That you wanted to send to employees as a kind of required learning content. Probably you can also do when you're creating campaign if you are selecting a required learning category. Yesterday we have seen campaign type, campaign category we have seen there. You'll be getting notifications, you'll be getting survey, you'll be getting learning course or multiple options. You'll be getting learning course would be a kind of option for you. Learning course would be an option for you when you're choosing the learning category as required learning. We will be doing announcements respective to learning, respective to surveys. Anything you can do that depends upon your requirement, but it's not like related to learning. Only you need to put in your the learning and should not be kept on landing page. It's not like that. You can announcement will not restrict in any area. You can create that banner and have that announcement made on your landing page also. You Thank you. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.